The Evansville African American History Museum is a staple in the Tri-States Black community. The museum is set in a historic housing project set up in the age of the New Deal. The majority of the Black community resided in these residencies. Today, the museum preserves what is left of that once large and thriving community. The museum exhibits how life would have been in the late 1930s for the African American community. Moreover, the museum highlights the accomplishments of Black people both in the past and present. This museum is a celebration center which showcases local artists, traditions, and communities. In the words of actor, philanthropist, and Evansville native Ron Glass, the Evansville African American History Museum will serve as an oasis of culture and peace, where all can celebrate the diversity that is in the community.
Good afternoon. My name is Brittany Westbrook. I'm the curator of the Evansville African American Museum.
Number one, what makes the Evansville African American History Museum special or unique?
Well, the Evansville African American History Museum is unique in our community because it is the only African American museum in Evansville. Now, we are a little bit of a house museum. We have a historic apartment that shows you what life looked like in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s for Lincoln Gardens residents. We are actually a little bit of an art museum, so when you go downstairs, visitors are able to see artwork on our walls from local artists who lived and worked and paint currently still in Evansville. And then we are a little bit of a history museum because we tell the story of this community, which was called Baptist Town. It was dubbed Baptist Town because of the amount of churches in the area back in the late 1800s. This area had over 200 thriving businesses, churches, civic organizations, as well as residents who lived in the area.
Why is this museum important to the community?
This museum is important to the community because we are a place where people can come and learn about African American history and culture. That's number one. Number two, we're important because we try to educate our community, whether it be about history, whether it be about art, whether it be about civil rights or racism, or just the everyday struggle of being African American in the United States. People can come here and learn about that. So we are an educational institution. We also are a place where people can come and they can feel safe to talk about issues that they may not be able to air or talk about places that impact the African American community. So this museum is very important because we allow people to learn about history and culture, and we also allow people to come and voice their opinions to try to change the community and better the community with their ideas.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Baptist Town so important or prevalent in your museum exhibits?
Baptist Town is prevalent because many people today actually don't know about the name Baptist Town. It's kind of funny because this area was called, it's the central city area of Evansville, or the south central part of Evansville. And the reason it was called Baptist Town was because in this south central area of Evansville, it had probably the most Baptist churches per capita. There is an assumption that all African Americans were Baptist, which was not true. We actually have a Black Catholic church that was in this area too, as well as AME churches. But there was an assumption that all African Americans were Baptist, which wasn't true. This was another way of people segregating African Americans. So African Americans were really forced to live in this area called Baptist Town. They weren't able to, many of them weren't able to live on the west side or the north side. And so they were in this one area, and this one area had everything they needed. They could shop here. They could go to school right at Lincoln High School. They could get a lawyer, or they could go to the doctor, because there were black doctors in this community, because of segregation. So Baptist-town is the story of people during segregation and how they overcame the adversity of racism. And so Baptist-town has to play majorly in our exhibits, because that was the community. Baptist-town was the community, and because we are a community museum, we have to focus on the community. So Baptist-town, not only was it large in a community capacity, it was very large in people's minds, because there were African Americans who did live on the west side and the north side, on the east side, but they were very small pockets. And even then, because of racism, they had to come to school to Baptist-town, or they had to shop in Baptist-town. So the idea of the mentality of being in Baptist-town was much larger than its
All right. Why is the information in this museum
physical parameters. We are still relevant within the community, because a lot of the people who live in Baptist-town, or what is Baptist-town today, Central City, still face the same adversities that people living in Baptist-town in the 1950s or 60s faced, which is poverty, issues with racism, issues with segregation, as well as issues with dealing with social engagement. So the museum today is very relevant, because we're still trying to educate people about these subjects, as well as to come up with ideas to fix some of these issues like poverty, racism, as well as other issues that may impact this community that still are ongoing from our past.
Thank you. How does this museum enrich not only the African American community, but also the Evansville community at large?
Well, I always like to say African American history is American history. Everybody can benefit from coming to the Evansville African American Museum, because we can all learn about history regardless. We all impact each other. And therefore, knowing about the different segments of everybody's culture, of everybody's history, can help everybody. Everybody's welcome to the Evansville African American Museum, because it's American history. So if you're interested in learning about American history, you could come to the Evansville African American Museum. Just learn about a little bit of how race played a factor in that history. So everybody's welcome, and everybody can learn about a different facet of history, as well as everybody can appreciate, artwork, as well as doing crafts. We do have children's programs here at the museum that we want everybody to come to, because we're very much, like I said, an art museum, and so we promote different facets of art, as well as different facets of history and how it ties in to this community.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. What can someone who visits the museum take away from their experience?
If you come and visit the Evansville African American Museum, you can take away a lot of things. Number one, you can learn about African American history. So if you're interested in finding out who may have been the first person to become a black fire chief, in Evansville, you can find out that it was actually George Flowers. Or if you're interested in just seeing what life was like for somebody living in Lincoln Gardens in the 1930s, you can see what that is like. You can also take away learning just how important Lincoln School was to this community. We're right across the street from Lincoln School, and not only is it today changing and educating the community and fostering strong people, it did so in the past. A lot of the African American families of Evansville had at least some relative that if they didn't go to Lincoln High School, they knew somebody who did, or their mother may have. And so everybody has gone through Lincoln School, which is now actually a K-8 school. You can find about the unique stories of on our kiosk that we have. We have an interactive kiosk. You can hear from the individuals who lived here in the apartments and what it was like for them. You can also learn about the participants here in Evansville who participated in the civil rights movement and who were activists. You can also hear the story of people like Emma Harris, who went to Lincoln High School, but although she didn't live in Lincoln Gardens, she lived on Evansville West Side. But how she had to interact, had to come to Baptisttown just to go to school. She had to travel every day 2 hours to come to Lincoln High School. She had to take multiple buses, and she lived 1 block from the school but couldn't go to it. So it's those stories about people in the community and their lives is what people can mainly take away, is that this museum is a human museum. We look at the different facets of how life impacted and changed and morphed and grew and showed how people lived and their memories of the past. So that was way long, I'm sorry.
No, that was great. What activities are hosted by the museum?
Well, we have a myriad of different types of events that we host, not only here at the museum, but throughout the community. Every month, we have something called Fabulous First Friday, which is normally the first Friday of each month, where there's a speaker that comes in and talks about community issues and how we can make a change in our community. We also have the youth and kids programs once or twice a month where we do craft sessions, or maybe there's a workshop. We even do genealogy workshop for those who are interested. We also have programs throughout the year that we have on our front lawn that we may show a movie that deals with African American history or life. We may also have craft sessions and just playtime outside on the lawn. So we have different types of programs that deal from art workshops, craft workshops, to learning about genealogy, to just learning about this community and African American history. So we have different types of activities, and the best way to find out what's going on here at the museum is to check out our website or to go to our Facebook page.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.
Janice?
Miss Janice, and you said you lived in 3 of these apartments?
Yeah, 2 of them in this building here upstairs here.
All right. And what about your time in Baptisttown was special to you, or what fond memories do you have?
Oh. Growing up in Lincoln Garden was very interesting. It was very close. We were very close-knit community. We knew practically everyone that lived in Lincoln Garden. The families would help each other out if mom, them, or the next door neighbor didn't have money or they needed food. We shared. You looked after each other's children. And all the stores and activity was down Lincoln Avenue or something. Lincoln Avenue has nothing to do with what it has today, the look of it today. Lincoln Avenue was booming. And they had your doctor's office, the lawyers, the dentists, food halls, all type of restaurants.
Lincoln.
Oh, well, Lincoln School. I went to Lincoln School too. Went to Lincoln School. Lincoln is not like it used to be, Lincoln Avenue. It would be nice to go back where we could get the Lincoln Avenue with more business, more cultured people in. It's still wonderful that Lincoln schools still do exist, you know. It's going back to where it is now and what it used to be back in the days. Kindergarten to the 5th grade. And like when I went, it was from the 6th grade to the 12th grade. And like my dad lived in Mount Vernon, Indiana, and my grandmother sent him every day on the bus from Mount Vernon to Evansville just to go to school. And you had people from Princeton, Rockport would come into Evansville just to go to high school.
And this was because of segregation.
Segregation, yes, yes.
So how have you seen things change over time other than business not as booming? Have you seen things kind of happen again, history repeating itself in any way?
Yes and no. How do I want to say it? There is quite a bit of change as far as segregation. We can drink out of same water fountains now. Sit on the bus. We went to Montgomery, and it lets you see just what history was about. There are still job situations. I don't know how long that's going to take for that to ever be where blacks get more jobs. Even the women force, now we're fighting for equal pay still, you know. That doesn't really have to also deal with race. That's just gender things that's going on in Evansville. But Evansville's still growing. It's going to be wonderful to get a school downtown for medicine. That's something that's going to put us back on the map.
And is there just anything else that, when you think of the History Museum, the African American History Museum, what has it done for our community and our culture?
What we our goal is to bring awareness to the community and outside of the community, the history of Evansville. There was a lot of richness that was going on in Evansville. When you go downstairs, you can look on the Wall of Fame and see the different African American who have done wonders, not just Evansville, but for the nation, nationwide. You know, you had Mr. Mays, who owns a black chemical company. You had Mr. Don Rickens, who was an electrical engineer. You had Mrs. Zia Carter, who was the first black woman who graduated with a bachelor's degree in science, you know. So we have some very interesting people that were from Evansville. And I'm looking forward for our next generation. We have to teach our kids that they have to pick a trade, because there's going to be a lot of jobs that they're not going to be able to fulfill. So they're going to have to find out what jobs are going to be open to be filled for 2027 or something like that. There's a big gap that we're not going to have kids just trained for those jobs. So it's time for you and your age to look further and see what jobs or skills that you're going to need to fulfill. But there's a gap there. Yes. Thank you.